All right, so hello and welcome again to another sonADA interview. This time I am joined by Rebecca Collins, who performed with us in our 2018 festival, which feels like a lifetime ago. Many things have been happening since then. Rebecca, how are you doing?
Yeah, well, I'm all right. Yeah, I was just reflecting actually on the work that I performed back in 2018, and it does feel like a really long time ago. But it was such a joy to be in the basement of the Belmont Cinema. Such a great space, and I have to confess, I'm completely obsessed with this. There's a YouTube clip of a seagull trying to enter into the Belmont cinema on their CCTV footage, and I'm completely obsessed with that YouTube clip. So I regularly kind of revisit that material and have very fond memories of sonADA from that year.
Absolutely. On a similar note, because obviously there's a lot of working from home these days, I've just been sat in my lounge window where my desk is, and I've noticed that there's a block of flats across the road from me, and there's one flat that always has their window open, and pigeons just fly in and out. And I'm thinking, are
Oh,
they performing some kind of pigeon sanctuary in there?
oh, possibly. Yeah, maybe they've got some. That's how they're getting messages out and getting food in, something like
Oh,
that.
yeah, it could be organized. Oh man.
Yeah, I also had I had a seagull come visit me at my window actually. I mean, at the moment I'm in France. I've escaped to work from home, from a slightly different home. But in my flat in Edinburgh, I had a seagull come to the window and just kind of tap while I was working one afternoon, and I didn't let them in, but I don't know, maybe maybe I should
No, I think it's safer to stay away. So, yeah, I was just wondering how, obviously, lockdown, all very strange, everything happening remotely, all online. You're in France, of course, and
have.
how has lockdown changed the way that you're working?
Yeah, it's a really good and interesting question actually, and I guess it maybe gives me a bit of an opportunity to talk about something that I was working on kind of just before lockdown started, and I kind of continue to try to find ways to work on it, which is obviously tied to the work I showed at sonADA. So this project called Stolen Voices, which is a sort of 5-year investigation of the coast of the east of the UK, mainly the east, a little bit of the south, using eavesdropping or sort of listening in. And I guess the work uses listening as a framework to think about place through written and sonic frameworks, and approaching locations and sites as though something has happened. And myself and the other artists that I work with, Johanna Lindsley, have been sent as kind of artist investigators to figure out what's been going on. Because allegedly the fragments or the clues are in the soundscape. So I guess since kind of lockdown and since I last spoke to you, maybe I've released my first album,
Oh, awesome.
which is really exciting. And that's got 7 tracks on it by composers who've been part of the project along the way. So Pete Stollery, who you will know, he's got a piece on there. Mariam Rezai, Oda Siganalasa, Barrett Subtle Beauty, and Johanna and I have a piece on there called Postcards from the Ongoing Investigation, with Jan Mertens. So earlier this year, in February 2020, on the 8th of February, we did an album launch at CCA in Glasgow, which now suddenly feels like this kind of surreal sort of, end of year kind of, party blowout type moment, because it's like the last time that I've been physically in a room with a lot of other people in front of an audience. And so for me, that's been a real kind of shift, a real strange one, because right before we went on for the show, so Johanna and I were performing some text, and we had a number of other artists performing some live work. So Nicola Scrutton, who was doing some kind of vocal work. Pete was there doing his the installation version of the work. Barrett Subtle Beauty and Mariam Rezai was performing a new piece with some material from the book, which I'll talk about maybe a little bit later on. But right before we went on stage, Johanna and I both sort of said to each other, why are we doing this? What Or this is so, you know, because you feel so nervous before you go on stage in front of an audience of, you know, there must have been about 60 people in there. You know, it's like, why are we doing this? Why don't we just go home? Or you know, like, why don't we just stay at home and not perform? And actually, I've been thinking a lot about that. I mean, obviously, we didn't just go home. We did the show, and we stayed there, and it got me really thinking that, you know, obviously now it's so difficult to be in a room like that with a live audience, but yet there's something that I feel is kind of fundamentally important about sharing work in a live dynamic in front of bodies who are sat next to each other, who are sweating, who are sneezing, who are laughing, who are, I guess, a collective or a community of listeners in some senses.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that on the one hand, yeah, for me is kind of really changed. And I guess I was thinking at that time maybe about continuing that work in some way, or, you know, looking for some funding or to kind of tour it or something. But now that's sort of put a stop to it in one sense. The other thing about the live gig in Glasgow was that everyone who comes to the live gig or the album launch gets to have a raffle ticket as part of their entrance. And it's a conceptual raffle, which basically means that everybody wins who gets a ticket. Because there's nothing like, you know, winning a raffle. Once your number gets called out, you come up and you receive a copy of the limited edition vinyl album. Only 284 copies that were made, and myself and Johanna kind of shake people's hands and give them the vinyl copy and say, welcome to the team. So there's this sort of slight conceit that then you become a sonic detective or one of the kind of agents on the ground once you receive a copy of the record. I'll have to give you a copy of the record at some point when
be part of the team. That's such a nice idea.
So yeah, it's beautiful. And then you sort of have this moment where everyone is like really excited to be part of the team and to have a record and become sort of part of this community of listeners. So yeah, I guess there's, you know, a number of things there that suddenly we're not allowed to do anymore because of the, you know, very serious COVID-19 situation that we're experiencing. And I guess at the time I was given a number of different dates by the CCA. So I could have organized this whole event for, you know, late March, and it never would have gone ahead. You know, and equally, almost exactly a month later, on the 8th of March, you know, we were all in a very different situation. And yeah, it's kind of mind blowing to me just to kind of think of those choices for those dates, of that setup and its impossibility right now. And it makes me feel quite sad and quite concerned about what the future of live encounters might look like. Yeah. And, you know, I know that there's a lot of really interesting online events happening. And I think that, you know, a lot of the artist community are making some, you know, incredible steps in terms of bringing some sort of texture to this flat land that we're living in, you know. So I guess where did I get to? Yeah, that was what I was doing. So I've been continuing to work on that in the sense that it's also part of a sonic detective novel that I've been writing for the last 4 or 5 years. And in the sonic detective novel, there are a number of songs. And so some of those songs and some of that material was given to Marianne Rezai. And actually that's something that I wanted to play you a little bit of, if that would be okay. So there's sort of 2 extracts from this work. And I guess one of them is about 4 minutes, 40 seconds long, so I can play you a bit of that. But maybe it's worth me just telling you a little bit about the book. So it kind of continues on from the On the Ground project and these site investigations, but I guess it's not a documentary. It's more of an unfolding that's sort of pushing at the limits of what a crime fiction novel might be. and it's called Necessary Note.
Okay.
And hopefully it will be out 2021. It's hard to say at the moment because obviously there's been some issues with the publishers due to the COVID-19 situation, and obviously people being furloughed. Mm-hmm. Everything's kind of like pause. But it's a 100-page sonic detective novel where a team of sonic detectives are summoned to investigate an event which begins on the south coast of England and ends on the northeast coast of Scotland. The event is multiple. You might know some of the places where this takes place. The event is multiple. The circumstances of the event are constantly shifting. The urgency of the investigation is fueled by concrete concerns found in heightened forms at the border margin of the country, such as the UK's uncertain future relationship to Europe, the country's devastating immigration policies, the effects of climate change on coastal landscapes, and the state of extractive industries like coal and oil, and the development of globalized logistics. Mm-hmm. So in the book itself, there are clues that appear to the detectives in the form of songs which need to be deciphered. And so the detectives go and they perform these deep eavesdropping techniques to try to figure out what's going on. And they're led by the elusive figure of Her, who's the author of the songs. Mm. And her kind of relationship and her position in relation to the detectives kind of shifts from kind of client to sidekick to missing objects.
Very cool.
So I'm so excited about this book being available in the world at some point soon. So I'm going to play you, about 4 minutes, 40 seconds of Marianne Rezai's, she's a DJ, turntablist, composer based in Newcastle. And we sent her some materials from the book that were particularly related to the northeast of England. And she made this rather beautiful piece, which is actually using some of the text that is in the book. So if I can just figure out how to share this with you, I will play it to you. Okay. Okay, here we go.
Very cool.
Uh,
I don't know what to say. That was incredibly beautiful, but also like I felt it really captured something about the project, because I'm sat there and I'm listening to this beautiful singing, which is sometimes in harmony with the voices underneath, and sometimes it sounds a bit dissonant, and sometimes I can make out what it's saying and sometimes I can't, but I feel that's quite a bit like eavesdropping, where you just kind of get fragments and over time they begin to make sense. But yeah, that was a phenomenal piece.
Yeah, absolutely. We think about that quite a lot in terms of this idea of kind of sonic contingency, that maybe in the moment you can't make sense of something, but then maybe that you put something next to something else and next to something else, and kind of retrospectively you can sort of look back and draw a line through the fragments, and there you've got your case, you know. You're really onto something. Yeah, I find it quite emotional, I have to say, listening to that song, because there's something, you know, she talks about, well, it's like an ode to nostalgia politics, and I guess one of the things that perhaps I feel that we're sort of all living through at the moment is this sort of nostalgia for the way things were previously, and I guess there's now sort of attempts to get back to that, but with still this kind of real concern for a virus that is not yet contained, and those are very real concerns, that despite that desire to kind of click back into, you know, hanging out in pubs and cafes and things, it's sort of, you can't do that in a way that's responsible, or kind of it's kind of ethically problematic to do that now. So it's it's heavy. It feels kind of heavy, but in like a really poetic and beautiful way. And you know, it's also interesting to hear the track. It was live recorded at the gig at the CCA in Glasgow.
Oh, was it?
So that's what you're listening to, which was the first time that Mariam had worked with that material and shared it. And actually in the live version, it's quite interesting because the turntable scratching gets quite intense at some point. Like she's sort of like clearing out the sort of center of your ear or something.
Those turntable effects that come in towards the end, were they done live, or are they fixed recorded?
Yeah, that's live. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Also, it must have been a great performance to be at.
Oh, it was incredible. It felt like, and there was also a storm happening at the same time in Glasgow that night. So the stakes were high.
Yeah.
And yet, fortunately, you know, it's kind of sold out. So that was really good. But yeah, so the plan, like sort of from that gig and from that work as well that Marianne produced in response to the material, is to now think about bringing out a second album, with possibly exclusively with Marianne. You know, I think we're still in kind of early stages of figuring out how to do that, which I think is an interesting. Yeah, it's interesting how to work in collaboration, which I think was one of your other questions for this interview, because you know, I've worked with Marianne before, and you know, there's nothing better than being in the same physical space as somebody. But I guess now, given those limitations, how can you do some of that work? Or if there's an established relation, I guess it feels a bit easier perhaps to be able to continue to find forms to send material and to listen to things online, with the hope that at some point you can have another live gig at some point.
It's all very well and good working on a project with someone, even if you're able to collaborate online, but then you don't really know what final form you're going to be able to take. Like, do you plan for a live performance, assuming that one day we'll be able to have it, or do you do something online, or do you, I don't know. And I feel like whilst it's fantastic to have a lot of events online and people can see and take part in events that before they wouldn't have been able to get to, geographic restrictions, cost, whatever, there is something missing when you don't leave your house and you just open your laptop up for the 15th time that day and you listen to some music, and then when it's done you close your laptop and you, I don't know, go put a clothes wash on or something. It just doesn't quite feel as special anymore. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's like what we've gained in accessibility, we've lost in, I don't know, the spark, I feel.
Yeah.
And that'll
Yeah.
be,
Yeah.
we'll deal with that.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly hope that we can get back to, I don't think that it's a replacement. I think it can be an extension of things that we were doing already. And yeah, I agree that the accessibility point is I think really valid actually. And, that people can, maybe people who aren't able for whatever reason to leave their homes. I think it's great that there are, more things available. I think it's made event organizers maybe reassess some of those things, but equally, yeah, how do you develop different means that mean that people can physically leave the confines of their home? And I think one of the things that I've struggled most with is that I think I like to think in different physical spaces, and a lot of my work is tied to different geographical explorations and also hanging out and listening into people's conversations in pubs and bars and
organic environments, and
right,
you struggle.
being in the world is really important to how I kind of think, or thinking with things in the world and situations. So that's been a real challenge, and I don't have a solution, or I don't have it resolved, apart from this backdrop, but but yeah, I think it's for the moment it feels kind of possible to keep moving somehow with these ways of encountering each other online, and also thinking about how you can bring texture to online formats through the use of sound. And the other thing I wanted to mention was there's this group called Lights Out Listening in Glasgow who do these online, I think it's like once a month, listening sessions, and they used to do them at the old hairdressers in Glasgow. And I actually had a piece from the album, the Postcards from the Ongoing Investigation, that Johanna and I made with Jan Mertens, that played in June. And those are sort of nice events that are, it's still not the same as being together in a room, but there's something about it being a kind of collective listening event that they stream it live, I think normally on like a Wednesday evening. You can sort of lie on your sofa and you feel like you're part of a community of listeners, that are all on their kind of sofas in other geographies. There's something that feels really positive about that. And I know that there's been sort of initiatives now to do kind of like drive-in theatres or drive-in movies if you've got the sort of luxury of space to do that. But I do feel acutely that the main challenge is really for those enclosed spaces where air circulation is difficult to manage. So yeah, it's really tough. It's really tough to know what will happen. But I absolutely feel the same as you, that you can go to all these incredible things and then you sort of you don't get that moment where you get to kind of chat to people or have some kind of unplanned things happen. And it's sort of like you can almost plan your day to, I can go to something at 6, it finishes at 7, and then I can still make my dinner. I don't know, there's something that's almost too organized about that. Feels...
I get you. Very, very strange times. I was just I meant to kind of interrupt you a bit before. You mentioned about this album that you'd released. Is there anywhere where we can go and listen to it? Like, is it?
Yes, you can. It's also, there's an online digital version, and perhaps I can send you the link to that, because that might be easier than me saying the link out loud, because I don't. It's on this academic journal website, but it's free access. It's called ASAP, but maybe it's easier if we can put a link down somewhere.
Yeah. And then when I post it to you, I'll put the link on it.
Great. Yeah, perfect.
Cool. Thanks. I feel like we've kind of touched on pretty much everything without me having to check back with my questions. So let me just see if there's anything we haven't touched on. Oh, just while it's on my mind, Johanna, how is she doing during lockdown?
Yeah, she's all right. She's in Dundee,
Hmm.
um, and yeah, I mean, we've continued to kind of have discussions and meet online. And actually, we did a sort of online performance for a research seminar at Goldsmiths about infrastructure and meetings, and that was kind of interesting because that was sort of the first public appearance that either her or I had kind of made since lockdown, and that happened in, I think it was like June, mid-June. And it was sort of interesting because that was when we were really reflecting on the difference of sort of how we'd met and rehearsed kind of intensively for the work in Glasgow in February, and then thinking about how to bring some of the text, because we do this sort of vocal delivery where we say things at the same time,
Yeah.
and how do you do that online is a challenge when you might have I mean, my internet is always perpetually slower than everyone else's. How do you do some of that work, or how might you translate that for sort of online audiences? So it
Mhm.
was fun to work on that together, and to try some things out, and also to have a sort of discussion with a group of other researchers about what is it that we're actually doing and how do we really feel about it. Because I think that there are, in some ways, it's sort of like we've kind of just had to okay, we're just going to carry on doing everything we were doing, but now we just don't ever see anyone
Yeah.
ever again. And that's kind of a big band-aid for actually but then how do we really feel about this,
Mhm.
and how might we think about ways of meeting where we can unpick this and kind of really question this sort of lack of physical engagement or embodiment. So that was kind of a highlight for me from the past few months, in terms of having some time just to sort of stop pretending that it's just sort of business as usual, which I
Yeah.
find quite offensive, and just to sort of say, actually, what things can we try out, or maybe this doesn't work, but I just want to try this text in this way, or so it just sort of felt like a space that had a bit more wiggle room, to sort of experiment with these technologies that we're suddenly supposed to be experts at using, even though we've never really used them before.
Yeah. No, it's really quite phenomenal how the world seemed to just change overnight and everyone just had to adapt, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been a very difficult time, and it feels like in some senses, it feels like we're just in one very long day that kind of keeps unfolding. And that you just sort of keep waking up, and I sort of wake up and I think, oh, did this whole thing really happen? Am I in some sort of terrifying parallel of the life I used to have? But no, it's apparently it is really happening. So
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, I don't know what things are like over in France with you. But here in Scotland, we're starting to open up a bit. Scotland seems to have it kind of under control, though, I don't want to speak too soon because a second wave can strike at any point. Is it
yeah.
almost business as usual in France?
It's hard to say actually, because I've sort of been hiding myself. There's certainly a lot of people wearing masks in public places. I've tended to try to do a kind of click and collect type shopping experience, just to sort of minimize contact. But there are some bars open, and people mainly sitting outside and sort of enjoying their time. But I feel a little bit nervous about going into a bar, I have to say.
I've not been inside establishments yet. I've sat outside, but that's as much as I'm comfortable with.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting, I guess, to see how things unfold. And I guess one of the other things is how to have kind of idle time, or how to sort of relax sometimes when you're always in the same environment. I think that's a tricky one. And then how to kind of foster a sense of kind of ongoingness with all of this. How do you keep yourself in the game, in the sense of, you know, how do you continue to follow the responsible and kind of ethical protocols that you need to follow, and without sort of burning out, or you know, I guess without having that connection that you would normally have that would help you kind of socially reproduce yourself with, you know, meeting up with people and just, you know, talking some nonsense, and or, you know, talking about what you've been working on, or, you know, whatever it is that you need to do to just sort of unwind in a sense. Yeah, I think it feels strange to not have those moments to sort of punctuate your week or your day in any way whatsoever.
Yeah, it's strange because I mean, I consider myself to be a total introvert. And I grew up in the countryside. I didn't have any brothers or sisters, no neighbors. All my friends lived ages away. So I'm very much used to just being on my own and like being my own source of entertainment. So at the start of lockdown, it's like pretty much didn't bother me just being inside all the time. Honestly, it's kind of where I like to be. But then after a while, especially when I was furloughed at the very beginning of lockdown, which was wild for me because I'm used to being rushed off my feet, no time to breathe or anything like that. And eventually, after a long time, I got used to kind of just working on personal projects for me, which I haven't done in years because there's never really time for it. And then as soon as I got to enjoying that, I got brought off furlough, and because we kind of realized that lockdown was going to last for a long time, so we can't just stop for a year, you know. And then lots of other projects kind of had the same response. So I went from having no responsibilities to having a huge workload. And then I think because I've not really had to leave the house for anything, you end up in weird cycles where you just sit down at your desk and you work hours and hours and hours and hours and hours because there's nothing else to do. So you just work and you go to bed, you wake up the next day, and then you work and work and work and work and work. And you can spend weeks just working. And then you stop and you're like, wait, hang on, I've done 3 weeks of solid work. No wonder I'm exhausted. And so you go and relax. And then, oh, is she back? Can you still hear me?
Oh, I can't hear you. Sorry, my headset just ran out of batteries. So so I just had to still hear you. Yeah, no, I can still hear you.
No, cool. And so and then you relax, and then it's like, okay, time to start back at work again. And it's like, I don't want to go back to work because there's nothing. Who knows whether I'm sat on my laptop or not doing work? No one knows if I'm taking an extra lie-in or whatever. So I found it really difficult to manage my time when there's like no structure to my days. It's just big empty space that I'm supposed to fill. I don't know if you've maybe felt the same. Maybe you're coping a bit better.
Well, it's been different phases, I guess. I sort of started off with deciding to give myself quite a strict routine that obviously then I couldn't really keep, you know, that had kind of slots for yoga, for meditation, for reading, for writing, for other administrative work that I have to do, you know, and I then sort of became a victim of my own structure. Then I had to kind of give myself a bit of a break, or just say, okay, how flexible can my structure be? And I think then there's also sort of days that you can do more or less, and then also depending on how closely you're following the news, that can really affect your mood and sort of those kinds of fluctuations. And then I guess the uncertainty of everything, that, you know, can just sort of cause you to sort of spiral into some, just sort of unknown. I think right at the beginning I was starting to just envisage these very dystopic futures that I decided I had to stop because they weren't really very helpful. And then I mean, I think now I've got a kind of I try to stick to a sort of certain amount of working hours a day, and then make sure that I'm going out on a bicycle or going for a walk or something. And I think that maybe
you know, maybe one of the more positive sides of all of this, if we can think of positive things in the bleakness of everything, is just maybe being more attuned to what my body needs or kind of wants at certain points. And I think that your point about the sort of, you know, the nap and things like that, well, you know, if I need a nap, maybe I will, maybe I will take a nap. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's also just worth saying that actually right at the beginning of lockdown, I actually had coronavirus myself, which was quite intense. So I sort of started, I'd actually been in Spain at a festival there and had picked it up, and sort of really unlucky, but really fortunate to kind of have come through the other side. But So I certainly sort of spent the first few months just being completely exhausted and wiped out, and sort of lost my sense of taste and smell. You know, had this cough and a headache and a sore throat and all of those types of things. And then my concentration was certainly like lapsed quite a lot, and it was quite hard for me to sort of sit at the computer for any length of time, or to, I also had some strange thing with my left eye that's like almost cleared up, but you know, it was just this sort of like sense of these like sprawling ailments almost that hadn't, you know, then you weren't sure at some point whether it was related to coronavirus or whether you were now just really tired and exhausted because of the sort of home working regime. So it's certainly been a real journey in that sense. And yeah, I think now I have this kind of way of just trying to maybe keep certain tasks on like, I don't know, timed activities, and then like promise myself a nice walk or like a biscuit or something like that to just keep myself in the game. But yeah, certainly I miss sort of discussions with colleagues and other artists, and yeah, being able to just sort of, I don't know, think something through with someone in person. There's something about, yeah, I think there's something challenging about the sort of screen format for kind of thinking together with other people. Yeah, that's something that I'm kind of interested in figuring out, how to think through a screen.
I mean, it's certainly handy when, you know, you're definitely going to have your laptop or a tablet there and you can just, you know, Google something real quick. But yeah, it does. Yeah, I get what you're meaning, where it doesn't quite feel as, maybe it's organic.
Yeah. But and maybe some more of the positives. I've been trying to make some more time for reading, certainly, and sort of reading more widely and thinking about. So I run this course. Actually, it's a new course that I started last year called Gendered Soundings, Sound Art and Feminism, which I started at the University of Edinburgh last year, and it's going to run again this year. So I've been also just kind of thinking about how to run that online, which is, you know, a challenge, because part of the course for me was certainly about thinking. Some of the work last year was like practical, and kind of making to like step tone generators and things like that, and thinking about audio recording and how to do that, and doing some kind of technical upskilling. So I'm sort of rethinking that course for this potential online environment as well that we're facing.
Because you don't know where your students are going to be and what they're going to have access to. So
exactly. So that's all quite unknown at present. But I think there's something that's exciting in a way, maybe, about thinking through that. And I've just got some books that I'm excited to get stuck into over the summer. So I've got the new book by Robin James, The Sonic Episteme, which just came out. Got Aishan T. Crawley, who writes about the Black Pentecostal breath, his new book, The Lonely Letters. And I've been looking at some of Alexis Pauline Gumb's work as well, who's sort of writing in a sort of poetic, sonorous style, I guess you could think about. So yeah, those things, I guess having, maybe that's like a way of trying to think about these things differently that can be hopefully appealing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And throughout all of this, have you felt supported by, I mean, the art sector in general?
It's a tricky question. It's a tricky question. I guess there's obviously like certain individuals or other artists who are kind of friends and kind of contacts of mine that I've certainly, you know, been in touch with and had, you know, gin Zooms with and so on. That's been quite nice. And I guess that sort of seeing that people are doing kind of online events and turning up to those when I can and sort of supporting other people's work in that way, that's been really positive. And, you know, when you sort of go to an online event and you see someone else that you know, it's like sat on a sofa in another room, and you sort of send them a WhatsApp and say, I see your t-shirt with a mail on it, or, you know, whatever it is. But I guess I'm in maybe a slightly different position to artists who work exclusively freelance.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's kind of difficult for me to comment precisely because I sort of sit within a university structure as well. So yeah, I mean, I've seen that the sort of Scottish Artists Network have kind of been doing certain activities and like offering kind of groups and forums for people to discuss things. So yeah, I guess yeah, I think that there's been ways, you know, a mixture between kind of finding things myself and sort of infrastructures that I've already sort of been trying to build. So a bit of everything, but I can imagine that it's a really difficult time for people who are working exclusively freelance. And you know, I only hope that there's ways that you know, people can kind of continue to make that like a viable option, and that there's sort of support from funders for, you know, Creative Scotland, I think, are doing certain kind of bursaries for artists who need a kind of bridging moment, you know, for people whose work exclusively depends on sort of appearing in public or organizing public events. I think it's a huge challenge.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of difficult because, I mean, within the arts there are so many different jobs. You know, you're in the academic side of it. I do. I work for a community centre, so I do a lot of like community arts. And then, yeah, as you say, there's freelance people, and some people are happy to work online and they just kind of work by themselves and they haven't really changed. And like say, some people, everything's just been turned upside down. So yeah, but I've not had to really apply for any kind of support myself, but it's good to know that it's out there for the people that need it. For sure.
Yeah, from things that I've sort of seen on, you know, on Twitter or online in different places, I can see that there are some support structures in place that I hope people will be able to access, people who need it. So it's good.
Yeah. And I'm just looking at the time. We're coming kind of towards 4 p.m. Is there anything else you're wanting to add before we wrap out anything up?
I've got one more section of the track to play you, which is probably quite a nice thing to end on. Mm-hmm. Are you able to say anything about the future of sonADA, or do you know any things that will kind of happen in terms of live works for you? Yeah,
it's really kind of for everyone, it's just a huge unknown right now. We were actually planning to do, well, we weren't planning a festival as such for this year, but we were planning to do like a series of events, maybe one every 6 weeks for, I don't know, 6 months or so. And actually, before the whole coronavirus thing happened, we were talking about doing online things and remote performances, not from like a health concern point of view, but from an environmental perspective, like not having to make artists travel up to Aberdeen and make them travel back and all the rest of it. So we were looking into that, but we really didn't get very far at all until this all happened. So what we have decided is we're going to try funding dependent to get some online remote performances on the go. But even if we're not successful in getting funding for that, at least we'll have these interviews, you know, which is always great to do. It's great to reconnect with people that we know. So yeah. We'll see.
Great. Sounds really exciting. Sounds brilliant.
We'll be here in some form, definitely.
Good to know. Okay, I'm going to play you the second extract, which is part of the same piece that was at Glasgow in February.
How long is the piece in total?
I think it was probably around sort of 12 to 15 minutes long, I think, in total. I can get it to work. Sorry. That's not the piece, that's in the car outside. Hang on. Can you hear that?
The dawn chorus rises. We search and rises up on the The dawn chorus rises. The dawn chorus rises up on the beach of a former coal waste dump. Whose sounds are uncanny, sodium light orange, despite intensive cleanup efforts. On the we search for the jigsaw puzzle, the shining promise of the miscellaneous collapses into the poem. The dawn chorus rises up arbitrary former coal waste. A car boot sail in a field overlooking the sea. In the sea, ground looking the sea. A lord by a field overlooking the sea. We drive past factory. We drive past in the morning and there are a few lorries, jigsaw puzzles, toys, perfumes, aftershave, clothes, varnishes, toys, perfumes, after vinyl records, furniture, varnishes, e-cigarettes, grocery, jigsaw puzzles, vinyl record clothes, toys, perfumes, furniture, aftershave, nail varnishes, e-cigarettes, novelty ash. Novelty ash, perfume, aftershave, nail tapes, vinyl records, novelty research, jigsaw, batteries are the last of So jigsaw rising jigsaw battery clothes, toys, perfume, toys, vinyl days of the last of the area's perfumes, perfumes of brass bands, perfumes, aftershaves, some tarnishes, e-cigarettes. That speaks to our vinyl record. But the last time furniture we tried by its novel, it's 4 o'clock. Jigsaw in the afternoon, jigsaw puzzles. Jigsaw puzzles, batteries and clothes. Strategy, a collection potted, jigsaw puzzles, batteries and clothes. Batteries and clothes, vinyl records, furniture. There's something here. Puzzles, something here. More concern. After VHS vinyl records, furniture. And the actually feel like nothing ever happened.
Oh, sorry. Just ran into the second track there.
Very cool. Yeah, the thing I really love about Stolen Voices is it's so accessible to so many different types of listeners. Because this is something I've been really struggling with in my own practice, because I feel like I write all this experimental music, and when I perform it, I kind of end up performing it to the same crowd of 20 people every single time, which is it's fine. It's nice to have such a close-knit community, but I find that my work doesn't really reach many new people, probably because they listen to it and go, oh, what is this? It's just noise. But with the work that you're doing, I think it's something that everyone can relate to. We've all heard fractions of conversations and gone, huh, what's that about? And we've all done a bit of eavesdropping in our time. And I think just having that, I'm stealing this phrase from someone else, I can't remember who it is, there's something to hold on to factor is particularly key in your work being accessible to pretty much all listeners. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. That's really nice of you to say. It's interesting because one of the things that I guess I've been thinking through the project has also been about how do you sort of take aspects of kind of listening that might be very particular to a specific location or might be very familiar to a certain group of listeners, and then what's the sort of translation process almost to make that how can you also get a kind of hook in if you don't necessarily know the nuances of that specific geography? And I guess sort of part of the reason of putting the album together was also to enable listeners who are outside of those geographies to be able to hear the work, because often the tracks have been kind of made with composers in the specific locations and then played at live performances in those specific locations. Yeah. So then the sort of next phase has really been about how to make that travel somehow to listeners who are elsewhere, and then also how to make somehow how to make that have some sense of relatability, that maybe if you don't know Aberdeen and its sort of relationship to the oil industry, but maybe you know another specific geography that has a relationship to the oil industry or to an extractive industry of any kind, that there's kind of something that you can hear within that makes you also think about those sites and those kind of labor processes as well. So yeah, it's been really great to put the first album together, just in terms of thinking some of those things through, and putting a kind of narrative together or dramaturgy together for the tracks, so that they, and when you listen to it, because you'll be able to, because we'll put the link below or above, that there's a sense that your ears kind of are almost going on a journey of some kind through the different textures of the UK landscape. So I've been really enjoying sort of working on this. It feels like it something that's nice about it is that it kind of keeps unfolding as well in different ways. Maybe once the book is out, it will stop. Who knows?
I want it to stop.
Can I ever close my ears to what is to what is going on around me?
Well, I'll definitely be going and listening to the whole of that album for sure.
Great, yeah, and like I said, I hope to get you a real life vinyl copy at some point.
But please don't feel like you have to. But it would also be amazing.
Brilliant.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time, Rebecca. I'm glad that you're now keeping well, and I hope you continue to keep well. And it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you.
Yeah,
So,
really good to speak to you. And I think that you probably get the prize for the best lockdown hair as well.
oh yeah. Well, I've had this haircut for years, but I dyed it pink because I thought, oh, it's lockdown. Nobody's gonna see me. I'll just try something new.
I love it. It's great. It's really great.
Well, thanks very much, Rebecca. You take care.
Thank you. Yeah, you too. All right. Take care.
Bye. Bye.